Imagine you just took ownership of a massive, heavy-duty industrial power plant. It is sitting on your property. It runs on your fuel. It is the single most valuable piece of machinery your family has ever possessed. Now imagine the contractor who built it decades ago shows up, hands you a proprietary maintenance contract, and tells you that you are legally forbidden from touching the controls, looking at the output meters, or keeping more than a microscopic fraction of the profits. When you finally get sick of the arrangement, cut the lock off the gate, and turn the dials yourself, that contractor doesn't take you to court. They hire thugs to pour sand in the crankcase, smash the intake valves with sledgehammers, burn your front office to the foundation. You are left sifting through the ashes while they install a new manager who answers only to them. That is not a hypothetical dispute over a warranty. That is the exact blueprint of how America overthrew Iran's democracy. The reason was oil. And nobody went to jail. Today, we are tearing down the engine block of the 1953 Iranian coup. I am going to show you the precise stress points where foreign intelligence bypassed a sovereign nation's safeguards to trigger a catastrophic systemic failure. We are going to expose the engineered cash flow diversion that choked an entire domestic economy to death. And I will reveal the operational blacklist that global petroleum cartels used to ensure the architects of this nightmare walked away with clean hands and full bank accounts. But to understand the teardown, you have to look at the original specs. His name was Mossadegh. He was 71 years old. He wore simple suits. He was known to cry openly in parliament when he spoke about his people. His own supporters called him emotional, impractical, too idealistic for the brutal mathematics of Cold War geopolitics. He was also the most democratically legitimate leader Iran had ever produced, elected by a landslide, beloved by the poor, feared by every oil executive in London. And that last part is what got him destroyed. Look at the blueprints of Iran under Mossadegh in the early 1950s. On paper, it was a sleek, functional, high-torque machine, a massively popular parliament, an aggressive auditing mindset, a mandate to keep Iranian wealth inside Iranian borders. They looked at the Anglo-Iranian oil company refinery at Abadan, the largest in the world at the time, and recognized it for what it was. A giant one-way vacuum, sucking the nation's geological lifeblood out of the soil and depositing the revenue straight into British bank accounts. Mossadegh did what any independent owner would do. He nationalized the hardware. He evicted the corporate executives. He took control of the infrastructure and attempted to run the machinery for the benefit of the people who actually lived on top of the reserves. This is where the math hits you. The foreign engineering syndicate found the vulnerability immediately. The British didn't just walk away from Abadan. When they evacuated, their technicians physically stripped the control panels, smuggled out the technical schematics, and instituted a ruthless global naval embargo. They threw a suffocating blanket over the exhaust. They starved the intake manifold. They threatened any global shipping line that dared to transport a single barrel of Iranian crude. The physics of a shattered economy are brutal and entirely predictable. Choke off the primary export revenue, and you instantly drop the domestic currency pressure to zero. The civilian middle class starts feeling the thermal runaway of hyperinflation. Food prices spike. Unemployment tears through the working class like a sheared fan blade through a radiator. While Mossadegh sat in his office, watching the numbers collapse, he knew exactly what was happening. He had written about it, warned about it, begged the United Nations about it. Nobody moved. This was not a natural market fluctuation. This was an artificially induced stress test designed to fracture the structural integrity of the Iranian state. The economic strangulation was just the primer. The real extraction event required direct physical intervention. Enter the CIA and MI6. They did not roll in with a conventional standing army. Too expensive, too visible, too much of a paper trail. Instead, they arrived with a trunk full of untraceable dollars and a protocol called Operation Ajax. They sought out the weakest, most corruptible materials in the governmental structure and flooded them with cash. They bought the rogue military generals. They bought the newspaper editors. They bought the street gangs in Tehran. Why negotiate a fair market contract when you can just buy the men holding the guns for pennies on the dollar? This is the exact sequence of a cascading mechanical failure. The injected corruption eats the metal alive. The manufactured media panic artificially spikes the temperature. The bribed street mobs act as grinding compound, tearing up the social fabric and creating a deafening noise that masks the real damage happening down in the engine room. They took a running Democratic engine and deliberately spun it past the red line until the rods blew right through the block. On the night of August 19, 1953, soldiers surrounded Mossadegh's home. Not a foreign embassy, not a military base. His home. The man who had nationalized Iranian oil, who had stood before the United Nations and made the case for his people, who had wept openly in Parliament, was arrested in his pajamas at 3 in the morning. He was 71 years old. He would spend the rest of his life under house arrest, forbidden from leaving, forbidden from speaking publicly, slowly erased from official Iranian history. He died alone in 1967. The Shah threw parties for Western oil executives the same week Mossadegh was taken away. You do not comprehend the scale of this destruction from a sterile historical policy brief. You smell it in the air, the suffocating black smoke of burning newspaper offices rolling through the streets of Tehran. You feel the concussive thud of Sherman tanks blasting shells directly into the Prime Minister's home. You hear the raw sound of splintering mahogany and shattered plaster raining down on a broken government. It was a total, unrecoverable teardown. And the financial consequence? This was not a minor geopolitical rounding error. This was the wholesale theft of an entire nation's geological inheritance. By reinstalling the Shah as an absolute monarch, the Anglo-American resource extraction pipeline secured unfettered access to billions of barrels of crude. The raw wealth violently redirected out of the Iranian economy over the next 25 years scales into the mid-hundreds of billions of dollars. They installed a dictator who served as a heavily armed pressure relief valve, ensuring the oil flowed outward while keeping the population completely sealed off from the profits. Watch how fast this trap closes. Step 1. Quarantine the supply chain. Naval blockade. Starve the host. Step 2. Inject the abrasive element. Funnel millions in untraceable cash. Manufacture riots. Grind the security gears into panic. Step 3. Swap the motherboard. Arrest the elected prime minister in the middle of the night under a fabricated constitutional technicality. Step 4. Lock the warranty. Install an autocratic monarch backed by brutal secret police. Ensure nobody can ever audit the petroleum leases again. For steps. 1. Functioning democracy destroyed. The British got their oil back. The CIA got their regional base. Exxon, Gulf, Texaco, and Shell got their 40% stake in Iranian petroleum, a stake that had never existed before the coup. And Iran got 70 years of chaos, radicalization, revolution, sanctions, and war that is still burning today. The bill for one corporate extraction deal, paid entirely by 85 million people who never signed the contract. Mossadegh is buried in his living room. He requested it himself, so that Iranians would never forget where he died. Nobody went to jail. Nobody paid $1. Nobody apologized. If you want to understand how these geopolitical megacorporations actually operate, stop reading their sanitized press releases. Start thinking like a forensic auditor. Look at the scorch marks on the machinery. Because the moment you stop paying attention, the Anglo-American resource extraction pipeline is already drawing up the schematics for your backyard. Hit subscribe. We are just getting started.